to another episode of the Firehouse Chronicles, a living history of a lifetime spent serving others, as seen through the eyes of a veteran firefighter. This week, we have a veteran firefighter and another veteran firefighter who are also veterans of serving firefighters as executive directors of the Oklahoma State Firefighters Association. Our special guest today is Mr. Jim Minx, a guy that has done a whole lot, and we'll talk about that as we talk through this process, but he has done a lot for firefighters that they may not even be aware of. And to his left and my left is Mr. Steve Lumry, also a former executive director of the Oklahoma State Firefighters Association, who was also trained, I guess, at some point by Jim Minx. Is that right? You kind of raised him up.
I don't know if I trained him or not. I tried to give him information.
Okay.
He brought me along.
He brought you along. Okay,
Yeah.
He brought you along.
Yeah.
And Steve's here today is also a close friend and person that is very close to Jim Minx. And so we're really glad to have both of you here today. Jim, I know you've been dealing with some health trouble and issues along the way, and we're sure glad you were able to sit down with us for a few minutes. First of all, let's talk about the idea here is to get kind of your story. And it's not about me or anybody else. It's kind of about your path. So you started out as a firefighter in Oklahoma City, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and give me a kind of a timeline there.
Well, it's kind of amazing that I ever got on there because it was my brother-in-law. He kept, for 5 years, kept trying to say, you need to go down there and apply. And I wouldn't do it. And so, anyway, I was in business with my dad, and I was reluctant to give that up. But I finally did after I built him a building on his property. And so him and my mother could continue on without even having to go anywhere. So anyway, that worked out pretty good.
So you were in the construction business with your dad, or what kind of business?
Candy business.
Okay.
Yeah, we made candy.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, peanut brittle, pico flake, peanut squares, peppermint candy, and other assorted.
Oh wow, I didn't know. You know, that's the neat part about visits like this is I've never heard that part of the story.
Yeah, well,
you know, that's interesting.
Well,
The neat part of that story, I don't know if Jim wants to tell it for sure, but another former executive director of OSFA as a kid used to come. I'll let you tell the story.
Phil Ostrander, when he was a kid, his dad was a candy packer.
Okay.
And he'd come down to my dad's place, at night from Tulsa. We'd load them up, and they'd take that back to whatever little town he lived in at the time. And he'd pack it in packages, and then he'd put it on his route to go.
So he would kind of distribute the product around the different stores.
Northeast.
Well, that's interesting. I again, never heard that part of the story.
So before either one of them became firefighters, they had that connection.
We had a connection, that's right.
Well, I always say we're all connected by a million tiny threads. So you became a firefighter in the year 63?
Yeah, July the 10th, 1963. Okay. And normally they would hire on July the 1st.
Okay.
But I wasn't there when they wanted to hire me. And they was about ready to move on and pass me by. But I showed up that late afternoon and said, well, when I did that, Byron Hunter come around, he said, where in the world have you been? I said, well, I've been on a little vacation over in Arkansas. You told me to come back on this day, and I'm here. I'm here on this day.
Careful what you tell you.
Yeah, because I said, I thought my little wife, she deserved a little break, so I just took her over there.
Well.
Anyway, they hired me.
Well, so you got on.
Yeah, they put me to work there that night at the Central Station, and then sent me home at 6 o'clock to go to 5 to 22nd Broadway, and so that was the blues shift, and that's what they wanted me on. So what I ended up being on.
In those days, were the shifts like they are now? Were they 24 on, 24 off, or how did that look?
They were 24 on, 24 off, but you worked all of them. And we got finally managed to get a couple of shifts off, and so that helped a lot.
So vacation in those days was 24 hours long.
That's right.
You know, I've heard a couple of those guys.
Only, there was no 4 days off in there. It was just
Right.
2 shifts, 24 on, 24 off.
Yeah.
Hmm. So if you were sick, you were just sick, or
Yeah, you just had to tough it out.
wow. I've heard some other. That's the reason I kind of asked that question. I've had some other veteran firefighters tell me that, and it's hard to imagine when you look at the shifts now, and nobody wants to, be there forever, every day. You got to have a little time away.
It's helpful.
Oh yeah, you got to rest. And so you worked as a firefighter until I think 83. You said earlier.
That's when I went to work, 83.
Okay.
Oh no, I worked till
You
83.
worked till 83, and
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
retired out. What rank did you make?
I was. They let me become a captain, but
They
they wouldn't let me become a chief. Well, they had all kinds of things that they thought against me, and and I'm not complaining about it.
Well, they probably wrote down when you started you the 10th instead of the 1st, and that may have followed you through your whole career.
Well, I'm sure it did.
Mad at you from the first day.
From the very first day.
I bet that's not true. So
No.
after well, go ahead. I didn't know you were up.
Well, the deal was this, because it's kind of important, would you say?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's because I was the union president, and I arbitrated with the city of Oklahoma City, and took the city of Oklahoma City to arbitration,
Okay.
which embarrassed them. But we didn't get much. But the thing about it is, we never had to do it again.
Okay.
And so,
Set your posture.
yeah, we set the hook like it was going to be. And so anyway, I was sorry that they took that attitude, but I'm just was there to do what I thought I needed to do for the guys.
You're fighting for your guys.
Yeah.
And we're going to follow that line too, and that's good that Steve's here too, because he lived some of this with you.
Yeah.
Because you were union president of at that time the 1524,
Right. That was the name of it. 15.
which is now the local 157, I believe, is the Oklahoma
Right.
City arm of that.
That's the old original number that they got when back in the 20s.
Okay.
And when they did that, they got fired. Those guys that did that got fired and never got their job back.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they took a chance, and they said it's worth it, and we're staying out. And you want to fire us?
Hmm.
And so they ended up firing them. And so I'll tell you what, when I signed my card to become a firefighter, what happened was, the older guys there said, you don't need to sign that. We've got plenty to sign. Said, what that's going to do, they'll fire you. You're a new hiree with no protection. We're old hirees with some protection. And I said, well, I don't care. I want to be a part of this and take the chances that everybody else is taking.
And charge the hill along with them.
Absolutely. And so when they left, they threw my card away.
Wow.
I found it later. And I said, mercy. Why, and I said, well, I tried. But see, and the way I found out, I looked at the certificate that they give you, and my name should have been on the back side of it, but it wasn't. Yeah, so anyway.
See,
In those days, they were, the guys that were trying to reorganize the local were staying one step ahead of the chiefs who were sent out to catch them, stop them, and
okay.
kick them out of the stations
Right.
and discipline them. And they would, the station behind them, the chief just left, would call the station ahead and go, "Chief's on his way," and they would skedaddle out of there to the next station.
We use the circuit to do that.
That's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
One step ahead of them. That's funny. That's interesting stuff. So you had basically a firefighter career all the way through '83, retired as a captain, then went to work for the union. Is that
No, I worked for the union during that.
during
time.
the time? Okay, I want to make sure.
Yeah, and
Okay.
What they did, they ended up because we filed a grievance on it because we had become a union, and we won that grievance so that I could have time off to represent
Okay.
firefighters when necessary.
Gotcha. Okay. Which today is just, we don't even think about it. There's the guys that
Yep.
work the issues at the Capitol and things like that.
Right.
So, okay. So then about 83 would have been about the time you went to work for OSFA after your retirement?
Yeah, actually August the 1st.
August 1st, okay.
Yeah.
So you started with OSFA, the Oklahoma State Firefighters Association, in 1980, August 1st, 1983.
Yep.
And I think the story really, as far as for me, kind of begins there in a way, not to take away from the fire service, because that's obviously much appreciated. That's when you're in the boots on the ground, you're in the trenches.
Right.
You're one of the brotherhood, you know, so to speak, there, taking the risk, you know, whatever there. But I think when you really started finding your stride maybe was when you got to be OSFA executive director. Or did you start as executive director?
No, I started as the assistant.
Okay.
But
That's
within
right.
within a few months, they promoted me to executive director.
And is that, I've heard, and this is my youth coming out, but Pete Savros, is that?
Savros, yeah.
He was was he the director when you started? Did you work under him, or what's that timeline?
I hired him a year later.
Okay, I was never clear on how that worked.
I hired him, I said, look, we need a guy that's polished as well as knows everybody and gets along with everybody at the Capitol, and he's the guy.
Okay.
So I want to hire him as my director of legislation.
Okay.
And so what we did is we went over everything every day before we went out there, and I took a position on what it was, and I passed that along to him. And so when he went out there, either me or him go out there, what happened, we were saying the same thing.
Sure.
And that was important to do at that time.
What
Still
people
is.
just don't remember is during that time frame when Jim went to work out there, OSFA and the pension system were one and the same.
Yeah.
OSFA took care of all the pension records, and each individual department had its own pension board, and that's where the pension was paid out of. But OSFA maintained all those records, kept track of everybody, their time, all that kind of thing. And in '83, right after Jim came to work there, is when they divided OSFA and the pension system into two separate systems and made the pension system a statewide firefighters pension system. With all those individual systems consolidating into one under the state umbrella. And it was also housed at OSFA, but it was a separate organization.
So that happened after '83.
During '83.
During
That was the
83.
transition time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Bob Hollander was the original, he was executive director at OSFA that hired Jim.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then Bob went to the pension system, and when he did that, Jim became the executive director of
Okay,
OSFA.
that's clearing that up for me because I've heard some of the stories but didn't have the timeline exactly in my mind.
Yeah.
So there were several things that happened under your watch at the OSFA, which I think are pretty notable. And I didn't meet you until I got to the Capitol as a young legislator in 2002, so I know a lot of that happened before me getting there, but I've heard kind of how it developed.
Yeah.
And one of those was the firefighter memorial.
Yep.
And I've heard a lot of people say that that's your baby, that's your brainchild, or was your concept
Yes.
to start that firefighter memorial. What was the thought process?
Well, after everybody would go home, I'd sit out in the hallway of OSFA, and I'd think in terms of what we needed to do. And I said, you know what we need to do? We need to have a memorial. We don't have one. And the guys need to be memorialized. And so I set about trying to raise money for that, and I had a lot of help. People helped me, the firefighters helped me. I ended up raising almost $2 million, I think it was, without too much trouble.
Yeah.
And so what I did is, first thing I did, I put $50,000 of that money into keep the grounds always pristine and pretty. I put that in a, what do they call that? But anyway, I did that.
It was a trust, wasn't it?
Well, I guess it was a trust. I went over to
Community Foundation.
Community Foundation, told Nancy what I wanted to do, and she said, well, yeah, we can do that.
Nancy Anthony.
Yeah. So anyway, we got that done.
So you put seed money there to keep that kind of, keep the maintenance.
Well, it would grow, and we couldn't draw any money on it.
Right.
And I fixed it that way.
Yeah. So that's good stuff. But that memorial set, we pull up now, and we assume that memorial's just always been there, and it hadn't.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's.
Well, we were extremely fortunate that some of the larger people in Oklahoma City that had money knew what we were doing and
Cared enough to.
and they cared enough
Sure,
to contribute, and
Yeah.
so it really worked out pretty good for us.
So the memorial is one of the things on my list of what I would consider great accomplishments that are noteworthy, obviously noteworthy.
Yeah.
The other one is a little thing called Plan B. And that happened on your watch, as I recall, if I remember the legend. I've been at that Capitol for 20, I guess I'm going on 22 years, which is hard to believe. But as a young legislator, I remember you getting me by the ear and saying, sit down, I'm going to teach you some stuff.
Yeah.
And you knew I was committed to the fire service. So a lot of my best friends were firefighters. I had been a volunteer at one point, but I can remember you spending a lot of time with me teaching me.
I had to hold you steady.
I know you did. And at that age, I probably was 40. I was just a big kid. I veered off course pretty easy, so I had you kind of working the rudder a little bit, which I needed.
Well, the thing about it is, you were willing.
True. That's true.
Yeah, that was the big deal.
So what did prior to Plan B, and I think the thing that I also think is noteworthy, and again, I'm not trying to tell your story for you, but I think one of the things that strikes me when I look back on this history is that you were what we call a tweener.
Yes.
You were one of the guys that we fight so hard for today at the Capitol to try to make sure that those retirements are incrementally increased and try to get some relief to those tweeners, which is where you fell.
Right.
But so you were basically, and Steve and I were talking earlier, you were planting a tree that you may not have ever enjoyed the shade of.
That's exactly right.
So talk about Plan B. How did that?
Well, the thing about Plan B, actually, it went through the convention and passed the convention. And every time after convention, we look what passed the convention and on the meeting after that. And whatever has become passed, we've set about trying to accomplish that for the good of the firefighters. Well, everybody, when we started talking about that, I said, let's go around the room and see how you feel about that. Well, to the man, they said, well, we love it, but we don't think we can get it. And I said, well, I think we can. And I remembered an old Sapulpa senator who's always said, you guys don't have the right plan to get that over with. And I said, well, I think we do now. So I said, what we can do is we can pass this resolution. We'll get behind that resolution and we will make that happen for the firefighters of the state of Oklahoma. Now, when they put dates and things on it, that hurts a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what happened.
So there was a Louisiana plan.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you modeled?
We modeled it off of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Louisiana plan was kind of the same thing, where it gives that guy 5 years to build up a little bit. And
I think they actually did 7 years.
Yeah, they did.
Or 7.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe you're right, Steve. They did 7.
But it's no longer around either.
It
They
went
took it away from them.
It went by the wayside. But what we did, we put ours in the statute.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that it definitely, you told me young and early that it was in the statute.
It needed to be in a statute.
And you're right. And knowing what I know now, which is a whole lot more than I knew then,
Yeah.
you were right. That was a good move.
Yeah, we had to
Very
do
good
that.
move.
We had to do that. It's the only way we could guarantee that it might survive.
So you were a tweener, but what drove you? I mean, you weren't going to benefit. You were going to plant this tree. You were never going to be able to enjoy the shade of it, but you kept driving towards that. What do you think made you?
Well, it
hunker down and
was
work?
my job.
Right.
It was my job to do that,
Right.
and I didn't look at it any other way.
I can see that, and I witnessed that too. And
Yeah.
I think it's amazing, especially in today's generation, when you think about young people that wouldn't put that kind of effort forth for just a group. I mean, I think that's admirable. I mean, I guess I'm trying to say it's a neat thing to see somebody who would put that much effort into something like that for their brotherhood.
Yeah, they were my friends, and they were my people I worked with. They needed it. We needed that desperately.
Yeah. No, it's,
And
Well, I was just gonna say, his answer made it sound so simple. It was just my job, but
yeah,
it doesn't take into account all those after hours and long nights and all the work behind the scenes that went into getting it written and getting it introduced and getting it through all the committees and the votes and
it can
finally
be.
getting it passed and signed by the governor.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
well, it seems like we got that vetoed first time, didn't we?
I believe we did.
I bet it wasn't the first shot. I bet the first shot was a rough one.
Yeah, it was vetoed, and anyway, well, we went to convention up in Stillwater, and the Speaker of the House came in and said, he was talking about legislation, and he said, because we reintroduced it, or we're going to, he said, Jim, if you reintroduce that, I'll make sure that thing passes. I said, well, that's what I'm going to do.
A little commitment.
Yeah, had that commitment from him, and it did happen.
You remember who the Speaker of the House was then?
Yeah, the guy from Stillwell.
Adair.
Adair.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was him.
Larry Adair. I was actually served under Larry for a couple of years there when I was young.
Well,
So-
Larry was a man of his word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so now we didn't have everybody that way, but he was.
So what did Plan B kind of do? I mean, it went from the tweeners, and that's what a lot of these young guys, and one of the reasons that we do these videos is not only to capture your history and your story, because that's important, very important, but also I want the younger firefighters to understand a little bit about how we got here,
Yeah.
the sacrifices, the struggles. It wasn't just easy.
No.
And so prior to the tweeners, they had the escalators, which some of the older guys are on the escalator,
All right.
which anytime a city gives a raise to their active firefighters, and you guys correct me if I'm not telling this right, anytime the city gives a raise to their active firefighters, the retirees get a percentage of that.
Half of it.
Half of that, okay, and that's the escalator.
That's the escalator, yeah.
And that was pre-you, in other words, you
Well, I missed that deal
You
by
missed that.
45 days.
couldn't have been much. I got to thinking about it.
I missed that by 45 days, and I think they did that on purpose.
I'm telling you, you showed up on the 10th instead of the 1st when you were supposed to be there.
Yeah.
That's it, you took a vacation. You
Yeah.
paid for that ever since.
I know it. I know it, man.
I guarantee you, I think that's the one thing I can see that keeps showing up is you should have been here on the 1st instead of the 10th when they wanted to hire you.
Well, you know what? I told them, hang it, we need it.
Pound sand.
Yeah, just pound sand, because we're gonna go ahead and pass this, and you're gonna do it for the firefighters that qualify.
Well, and I think that's, again, I keep reiterating this. I'm not trying to, run the point into the ground, but I think young guys need to understand what that commitment looked like.
Yeah,
What that commitment that you had to the guys ahead of you that were not there yet, and we've been through some battles, and Steve was executive director as part of the time when we were fighting for a COLA, and it's so hard to get a COLA.
yeah,
And the tweeners are who needed it.
yeah,
The tweeners are who hadn't had a COLA in 12 years.
right.
And so that fight, and we continue that fight. That fight will continue as long as I can breathe and as long as anybody else can breathe. I mean, it's going to be, that fight's going to continue.
Well, you know what? I hope you get it for my wife.
Well, that's.
I'm done.
But I'll tell you what, that's for me, whatever it's for.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's just, I've committed a long time ago that I was going to do everything I could for firefighters.
Yeah.
I did it as a legislator. I'm trying to do it as you guys lobbyists. And so, I mean,
Right.
it's an easy thing for me. It's not something I just said.
Well,
You know.
I understand that. Of course,
So-
my wife, I sometimes forget that she's passed away.
Well,
You know, so
I
she
get
ain't gonna get it either.
I'll get it for whoever we can get it for, and I'll get it
Yeah.
not to honor you. How about that?
Well, that'd be wonderful.
I'll get it to honor you.
The
However that looks.
Tweeners is a 7-year period.
Yeah,
People forget that too.
that's not a very big group. I mean, very
83 to 89. There are the people who didn't get the escalator and don't get Plan B.
Yeah.
Only increases they get on their pension is when the legislature
Yep.
votes them a COLA, cost of living increase.
Yeah, and it's been a tough road for those guys, and we know it has. And so I think the fight will continue. Obviously, we're going to keep trying to dig, and, you know. But Plan B put those, you know, because the tweeners again, the guys between the escalator and the Plan B, that's the 7-year period where the most suffering's going on
Yeah.
financially.
Right.
And the Plan B, thank goodness for guys like you that had that vision and the tenacity to go after something like that. These other guys have had a little easier time. Not that they're wealthy or anything like that, but they've had a little easier time
Oh, yeah.
because they were able to kind of put that little nest egg together in addition to
Well,
that.
see, everybody thought I had that too. That's why I was fighting so hard for it.
Yeah.
When they found out that wasn't it, they chirped a different tune.
That's a whole nother reason we tell these stories.
And-
I want people to know that.
And there are people that don't realize or forget that in 89 Plan B was established.
Mhm.
But there were a lot of guys that left with just 1 year because they never thought Plan B would stay around.
True.
And they left with a little bit of money in their pocket, but it wasn't anything big. And so they'd go buy a new pickup, or they'd buy a new boat,
Yeah,
or they'd pay off some bills, and it was gone.
Right.
So the tweeners, even though you could say Plan B started 89, the tweeners actually extends technically a little bit past that, probably for another 5
It
years.
took a little time to get that. Yeah. To
For
build
people
that
to
up.
realize
Right.
how to do that. We weren't financial wizards.
Right.
Oh, you were too.
No.
You were left-handed, weren't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
I relied on you to do it anyway.
again, I really think that I think it's noteworthy. I think it's one of those pieces of our history that I want people to know
Yeah.
is that here's a guy that dang sure went to the ball and charged the hill for no benefit to himself, but for the brotherhood,
Yeah.
which is kind of what we're all supposed to do. I mean,
Right.
and you probably wouldn't brag on yourself for doing that because to you, as you just said, it was your job.
I never have bragged about it.
But it's just one of those things that I think a lot of times we need that tenacity in our ranks.
Yeah.
We need that tenacity wherever it can be because this is worth fighting for. This group,
Well, I guarantee it is. And
this group is.
I'm glad you're doing it.
Well, I want, you know, and I don't know if I've had a chance to tell you this. I told Steve a little bit. I've interviewed a lot of the guys. Clifford Lewis, for example, you know, an
Yeah.
atomic veteran. What a great guy.
Yeah.
And I want those young guys to go to those conventions and see a little snippet of these videos and go, I see that old guy teeter in. I didn't know who he was or what he did. My gosh, he was one of our pioneers, if you will.
Right. Right.
And I want people to have that little snippet of, wow, we didn't just show up here and it was good.
Yeah. Right.
It wasn't always good.
And it took leaders like Jim and others that brought us to this point, but it also took the rank and file firefighters.
Oh,
You know,
sure.
Nowadays, we think we can sit back and give a little money to our local or wherever,
Right.
and it goes to a PAC fund and it goes to legislators, and we think that helps us, and it does.
It does.
But
It
it
does.
doesn't help the way they did in Jim's day and in my early day, where we had to show up and work for those legislators and knock doors, and we had to
Mhm.
put out signs, and we had to make signs, and we used to have 100 to 200 people show up to do that kind of work.
Right.
Nowadays, you try to put out a call and you get nobody.
Won't happen.
And our
Won't
and
happen.
and you can testify to that,
Oh, I
our
promise.
influence wanes at the
It
Capitol.
does. It makes it
Because we're
tough.
not, they like firefighters, they like to have their picture taken with firefighters, but they don't know firefighters. They
Right.
don't have friends that are firefighters like you did.
That's
That
right.
made a difference.
That's exactly what made the difference for me. Is a couple of my very best friends that I've been friends with since school were firefighters, and somebody made the comment to me, and I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was a Republican in 2002.
I know you
elected.
were.
First one that ever been elected in my district, and a bunch of my firefighter friends said, "Well, you can't do us any good. You're a Republican." I said, "You watch me." And by dang, I said, "I will stand up for you guys because you're my friends."
Yeah.
And it matters.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was a volunteer for just a year and a half or so. It wasn't
Right.
anything. I was no career firefighter, but those guys were my friends, and it mattered to me. And so I think we've got to have that. We got to have more of that.
Yes.
We got to have more of those guys that know they're firefighters. I would eat. It was nothing for me to run by a couple of the stations there at Lawton where my friends were, and they'd say, "Hey, we're cooking something at lunch. Come by."
Yeah.
I go by and get to know them, and I, not only my friend who I already knew, I'd get to know the other guys on that shift,
Absolutely.
and that's a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal, and I think we've lost a little of that.
Yes, we have.
And-
And it's harder, I've always said, and Jim taught me this, it's harder to say no to a friend
Oh yeah,
that you know than it is to just an idea or an entity out there.
exactly. So I think we've lost that. Social media may be part of the problem. I don't know, but we don't have that personal contact probably that we need.
Right.
So even through these processes like this interview, it reminds me maybe where some of the holes are.
Yeah.
So
Well, let me tell you, buddy, you've done a great job for firefighters.
well, I appreciate that, but I've done nothing compared to what you've done.
Well,
You've lit the way, and
But you don't need to compare to that.
Well,
That ain't your job.
that's right. It's my job. And apparently that's enough to drive a guy because it drove you.
Yeah,
Didn't
right.
it? Drove you.
Don't worry about that. Just
Yeah.
do what we ask you.
We're doing it.
You heard him say tell you. I said ask you.
That's right. That's there. You go.
The memorial, the cost of living catch-ups that we did for several years,
Yes.
those colas. He was one of the last ones to get a cola
Mhm.
until, not that others didn't try,
It's just
But-
a hard hill.
because it is. And he was one of the last, he's the last one to get one, and until you and I came in
Right.
and finally took the work of everybody else that built on and
Mhm.
pushed it over the edge. And
Tough
then-
sled too, boy.
and Plan B and backdrop, and there's just
Yeah.
NFPA safety standards for firefighters, gear and
Right.
equipment.
That
So
back-
many things that he had an impact
That
on.
backdrop deal was a deal. I'm telling you. They didn't think that could be done at all.
Yeah, but it sounded like it needed to.
Yeah.
It needed to happen.
Yeah, it could be. It was
Because a
good.
guy on Plan B, if he got injured or hurt or couldn't finish that
Yeah.
period of time, maybe he got disabled or got hurt on the job or whatever, hurt on a run, then he's out of commission. He doesn't have his years in for Plan B, but he needed it. So that backdrop allowed him to go ahead and count, if I understood that right.
That's correct.
That's right. Do it. You could count backwards and,
Yeah.
and increase your pension.
Right. Which is pretty important if that's the last time you get to work because you're injured.
Yep.
And I think that's another thing we forget a lot of times is how dangerous this profession really is.
Yeah.
I mean, the risk out there, I mean, people are always, saying, oh, well, they just sit around the firehouse and cook. No.
Yeah.
No, they jump up in the middle of the night with no warm up and they jump on into bunkers onto a truck. And I mean, so it's, it's
Fires, floods,
Oh,
tornadoes,
everything. Yeah,
mass shootings.
Yeah.
We're there for everything.
that's right.
The
That's right.
bombings, we're there for all of it.
And we haven't even started in these interviews, and it'll be interesting. But we haven't even started on the guys that responded to the Oklahoma City bombing yet. There's a
Right.
million of those stories
Right.
about this brotherhood of guys that responded to that tragedy and
Absolutely.
that domestic terror incident that we, never thought we'd ever see anything like that.
Oh.
And we've got a guy we talked to a few days ago we adopted him from New Jersey. He's one of the pipers,
Yeah.
Kevin Donnelly. He's
Yeah.
a bagpipe player. He was a New Jersey firefighter. He responded to the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting story in itself.
I would imagine.
And we interviewed him on a deal just like this the other day. So we got some neat stories we're telling, and we're glad to tell yours. And I'm glad you were able to sit with us for a few minutes. And I know you've been having some issues and things like that. But it's a real honor for me to sit here and talk to not only an old friend, but a guy that I always admired and a mentor to me. And I know to Steve. I mean, Steve probably feels the same way. It's an honor for us to sit here and be able to capture a little bit of who you were and what you thought, and kind of why you did what you did. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your service to the fire service.
Well, man, it was just,
thank you for being a friend. That's a big deal.
It was real easy for me.
Well, I think.
Because you were a great guy.
Well, you made it look easy, and you made my job easier because you educated me, and that'll be appreciated till the day I take my last breath. So,
well, thank you.
You just let us know what you need, and we appreciate again your service to the fire service and the association and the unions and everything you've done. We're forever grateful, and I hope that at some point a younger firefighter will watch this video and understand some of the pioneers who kind of paved the way. You're one of them. So,
How much difference one person can make.
Yeah, one person that's committed. So
they gave me a lot of knots on my head.
Oh, I bet it did. Yeah, I bet it did. I bet it did.
And my wife said, "Why are you letting that happen?"
Good.
And I said, "Hey, I've got a goal I'm after. So
You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you got to go after it.
It's going to happen."
Well, we appreciate that very much. I'm Don Arms with the Oklahoma State Firefighters Association. Thanks to Jim Minx and Steve Lumberry for today's edition of Firehouse Chronicles. We'll see you next time.